Welcome, my friend, to another quiet journey through history. Before we begin, take a slow breath in and let it out. Settle into your chair, your bed, or wherever you've chosen to listen. If your eyes are heavy, that's perfectly fine. You can simply let my voice carry you. But before we drift back thousands of years, I have a little favor to ask. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see our sleepy little community spread across the world. And if you enjoy this kind of quiet, immersive history, please subscribe, like, and share this video with someone else who loves to fall asleep with the past whispering in their ears. Imagine it is just before dawn in the city of Rome. The light has not yet reached the rooftops, and the only brightness comes from the soft flicker of oil lamps, some sputtering in doorways. But in a crowded, creaking Insula 1 of the many multi-story tenement buildings that stretch upward like brittle wooden cages, the air is close, damp from your neighbor's cooking fire below and heavy, with the scent of sour wine, old fish, and damp straw. You don't own a mirror, but you know you look the same as always, hollow-eyed, skin dry from the dust and sun, hair tied back with a scrap of cloth. You put on your tunic. Like most Romans, you walk everywhere. It comes from miles away, traveling through the great aqueducts, those towering stone arches that stitch the empire together. It's a marvel of engineering, but to you, it's just where you fill your jug, or a fuller bleaching cloth with urine-soaked chalk. You might be a porter, carrying loads up narrow staircases, or a laborer at the docks, unloading amphorae from river barges. A handful of olives, a chunk of cheese if you've saved. Maybe you've come to hear the magistrates speak, the marble columns shine, but their power is not for you. Still, it is beautiful in its way. The city hums around you, or to watch a dispute be settled with sharp words and sharper sticks. You return to your room, light your lamp, hearing the scrape of rats in the rafters, the soft cough of a child nearby, and watch the flame tremble with aching feet, with hunger not quite satisfied, with prayers whispered to unknown gods, or none at all. You lie down once again on your straw mattress, the endless breath of the city just beyond your shuttered window. There are thieves here and spirits. Some say the dead walk in these streets. You keep your purse close, your eyes sharper. Sometimes you're sent out to sell garlands or grind grain. You believe them. Maybe you've come for the grain dole, waiting in the endless line for your monthly ration. If your name is still on the list, if the clerk hasn't lost your tablet, you chew slowly, careful not to break a tooth. Roman dentistry is more hope than science, and extractions are done with forceps and prayer. The smell of garlic lingers on your fingers. You do not mind. Or a scribe, copying legal documents by hand in cramped, ink-stained script. Most jobs are repetitive, dirty, underpaid. The streets are narrow, and the smells shift every few paces and cents. From a shrine, children chasing chickens, men rolling dice on flat stones. Your work is often hidden laundry, weaving, nursing babies that aren't yours. Sometimes you're kept in, and sometimes you find work that lives in the shadows and alleyways behind closed doors. Warm bread from a taberna, sewage, smoke, sweat. It's all woven together into a tapestry your nose has learned not to question. It's the only one you have. The streets grow hotter, the stones warm beneath your sandals. People rest where they can. A dog sleeps in a doorway. Children nap in the shade of a stall. You push on. It smells of sweat and last week's rain. And the city's lifeblood runs thick, hear hawkers calling out. The smell of frying onions reaches you, followed by the sharp tang of urine. A beggar coughs into his cloak. He's been coughing for days. Your mattress is made of flattened hay. Your blanket is coarse wool. And the wall beside your bed is thin enough that you can hear your neighbor snoring, ... or possibly praying. It's hard to tell. Others glowing faintly through cloth-covered windows. The city is not silent, not even at this hour. Rome never truly sleeps. You awaken not in a villa, nor even in a house. There is no private toilet, no running water. If you need relief, you'll carry a small clay pot downstairs. Bakers are lighting their ovens. A fishmonger yawns and arranges his wares on a stone slab today. River eels, pickled mackerel, and something else with more bone than meat. A cart rolls by, pulled by a pair of mules, their hooves loud on the stones. One of the wheels wobbles but doesn't fall off. Yet, hoping to find the shared latrine unoccupied and not too foul. But most people don't bother. You hear, as you often do, the slosh of someone tipping a chamber pot out the window above, followed by the soft splash as it hits the street below. The street cleaners will come eventually, boys with brooms and carts, but for now, the cobbles glisten unpleasantly. You rub sleep from your eyes. Down on the street, the city is beginning to breathe. There is no coffee, no tea, no breakfast to linger over. If you're lucky, you might buy a piece of bread yesterday's, sold at half price. If you're very lucky, it might be smeared with a thin paste of crushed olives and herbs, though it tastes mostly of vinegar and grit. You begin your walk. You pass the public fountain and join the small queue of people waiting to fill their amphorae. The water is cold, clear enough. As you pass through the Subura district, the streets grow louder, livelier. The Subura is where the poor live. Now, you work if you are fortunate enough to have work. If you are a woman and not a vendor or wet nurse, lunch is not a meal so much as a pause. In the afternoon, the sun climbs high. Later, you pass the Forum not as a tourist, but as a citizen who needs something. News, bread, justice. You don't speak to the senators in their red-striped tunics. You keep your head down. As dusk approaches, you begin the walk home. The air cools slightly, torches are lit. The city changes. Back in your insula, your building groans as people climb the stairs, one floor after another, and so the day ends, as they all do. You survived. But only just. The story begins not with the clash of swords or a cry of victory, but with the slow scraping of sandals on packed dirt. You are a Roman legionnaire, not a general, not a hero of marble statue fame, but one of the many, one of the thousands. You swore your oath to the emperor, your gods, and the standards of your legion. And now you belong to Rome. Around you, others stir some groaning, others silent. There's no luxury here, only function. The tent is shared with 7 other men, brothers in boredom and hunger and calloused foot fatigue. You've stopped remembering what it's like to be alone. Body, mind, and time. Just another soldier marching under the weight of armor, heat, and obligation. Your name is recorded somewhere, scratched onto a wax tablet in a dusty office, or weapon maintenance, or latrine cleaning, or message running, or standing in formation for inspection that never ends. The days stretch long, marked not by events, but by orders, each one barked from a centurion whose eyes miss nothing. His vine stick taps against his leg as he watches. You hope it doesn't tap against you. The soles are worn, but hold fast. You wipe your shield. You eat if you can stomach it. That's the term of service for a legionnaire. If you endure, you might be granted land, citizenship if you didn't have it already, and a pension. But for you, it is a bedroll, a blade, and an endless horizon. But that's far away. You can barely think past the next footstep. You try to sleep. The fire burns low outside. You hear men whispering about home, about olives and wine and a sister who used to sing. You close your eyes and breathe in the dusty air. You don't speak of what you saw, the way one man begged or another bled, or the sound of a horse collapsing beside you. You push it down. And that can be the worst of all. Waiting in a muddy camp, the rain creeping into every seam of your clothing, turning your sandals into sponges, while rumors pass from mouth to mouth about enemy movements, uprisings, promotions that never come, or the death of an officer whose face you never saw. The nails tap the earth as you move, the moments when the waiting ends, but the urgent blast that says it is time. You stand heart heavy but outwardly calm. You fall into formation, shield in hand, sword at your side. You march toward the din of battle. Though you cannot see the enemy, yet only the dust they raise and the pounding of your own blood in your ears, like muted thunder among 100 others doing the same. You march in formation, over and over, each man spaced a precise distance apart. You turn on command, raise your scutum, the chaos is too loud for words, your comrades, your breath, battles never do. When it ends, you are still standing, or you are not. You thrust as you were trained, not wildly, but with measured fury, pushing with your shield, stabbing low with your blade. Or another ditch to dig, or another day of drills beneath a punishing sun. You may be stationed in Gaul or Britannia or the Eastern Front near the Parthians, wherever Rome needs a presence, a line, a flag. You will be there. You are always there. The enemy is faceless, just limbs and screams and the wet sound of impact. Thrust with your gladius, practice step and strike, until it is no longer thought, only muscle memory. Your shield arm aches, your sword arm burns. You do not stop. You wait before the sun, beneath a rough woolen blanket, the air still chill inside your leather tent. You rise, pull on your tunic, already stiff with sweat and dust, and strap on your caligae your hobnailed sandals. First, breakfast. It's rarely more than a ration of poles or thick barley porridge. The Roman camp must be fortified every night, no matter how far you march. You wield a pick or shovel and help dig the fossa, the trench, and raise the adger, the rampart. Sweat trickles down your back, down your thighs, and mixes with the fine dust that clings to everything. Your skin, your cloak, your very lungs. By the time you rest, you are coated in the color of the land you march through, grayish and warm, and a piece of hard bread that scrapes the roof of your mouth. Sometimes you're lucky, and it's flavored with vinegar or onions. You eat in silence or with dull conversation about yesterday's march or the state of someone's feet. Then it's drills. Endless drills. Even when there is no enemy in sight, especially when there is no enemy, you train. Sometimes you dig. Then there is guard duty. Some days there is nothing to do but wait. And then there are the days of terror. The trumpet sounds not the one for formation or food, then they are upon you. There is no poetry in this. It does not last long. If you live, you count your fingers. Later, you clean your blade. Tomorrow there will be another march. Years pass like this. 25 of them, if you survive. For now, you lie on your straw pallet in the tent, your helmet beside you, your gear packed neatly. The world of Rome is large, sprawling, magnificent. You are Rome's shield. You are its shadow. You endure the mystery of the Mithraic cult beneath Rome. The deeper you go into Rome, the quieter it gets. Not the streets, those are a steady hum of sandals and gossip, wheel ruts, and hawker cries, but beneath the taverns, the forums, the bathhouses, down past the paving stones where the air still smells faintly of smoke and stone dust, there lies a different world. No, what you find here, carved into the underbelly of the empire, is something older, quieter, stranger. This is not the grand temple of Jupiter, nor the orderly columns of a public basilica. It is the Mithraeum sanctuary of the god Mithras. The room is low and narrow, built like a cave, even when the space above is all brick and marble. Some scholars believe it mimicked a real grotto. Others think it was always meant to be hidden, secret, shielded from daylight and prying eyes. Whatever the reason, the effect is unmistakable. As you step inside, you leave Rome behind. You became a raven, then a bridegroom, a soldier, a lion, then a Persian, then a sunrunner, and finally a father. Each rank more mysterious than the last. Of sacrifice, we don't know. We may never know. The bool is cosmic. Mithras left no scriptures, no parables etched into scrolls. The knowledge passed from man to man by whisper and firelight. The rituals were enacted with masks, costumes, chants, and the pouring of libations. Bread was broken, lamps were lit, but many were just abandoned, left intact beneath the shifting feet of a changing city. The god faded, but his runes endured. Wherever Roman soldiers traveled, they carved out these hidden temples beneath their outposts, their forts, their cities. A secret Rome beneath the public one. Oaths were sworn. Trace the carving of Mithras plunging his dagger into the bull's neck. See the stars overhead engraved, not real. Feel the weight of a ritual long vanished, and yet somehow still here. Just private. Bound not by grand processions, but by a shared silence. The act is sacred. Around him are animals, a scorpion, a dog, a snake, each placed with precision. None of it is accidental, and none of it is fully understood. The air is cool, heavy with centuries of candle smoke and incense thickened by time. Your footsteps echo differently here. Who needed something structured, something personal, something secret? Christianity spread above, but Mithras was content to grow below. The walls seemed to draw in closer, not in menace, but in quiet invitation. It is not threatening. It is cloistered, ritualized. Along each side of the room are low stone benches, where initiates once sat, cloaked and silent. The floor is packed earth or faded mosaic. You see signs carved into the stone symbols. A lion, a cup, a dagger, a torch. Their meanings have been lost. Scholars debate, but Mithras doesn't explain himself. He never did. At the far end of the chamber is the Tauroctony, the central image of the faith. Mithras, young and radiant, slays a bull. The cult of Mithras was for men, and mostly for soldiers, men who had seen things. who marched far from home. Initiation was a journey, 7 grades, each with trials. You didn't just convert, you ascended. Little is written. Did they believe in salvation? In resurrection? Was the bull's blood symbolic of renewal? Of cosmic order? What remains are clues. A mithraeum beneath a church in San Clemente, another below the Basilica of St. Prisca, still others scattered from Britain to Syria. One archaeologist described it as a faith of discipline and intimacy, a brotherhood forged in shadow, not openly political, not revolutionary. When Christianity was legalized and later became the empire's dominant faith, the mithraea were closed. Some were buried, some were repurposed. And now, centuries later, you can descend again into that darkness. Touch the cool stone. Mithras does not speak, but the silence says enough. Banquets and marble baths, a day in the life of a Roman elite. The sunlight in Rome does not rush. It filters softly through sheer linen curtains, pooling on polished floors of warm marble and patterned mosaics. It lingers in golden tones over frescoed walls, gardens, gods, and mythic lovers painted in long-forgotten pigments. You are not required to work. The front opens to an atrium where rainwater trickles softly into the impluvium, a shallow central pool for collecting water. The air here is cool, the walls adorned with niches for household gods, your Lares and Penates, the guardians of the hearth. You greet them, perhaps silently, with a look or a whispered word. The rhythms of your day are not driven by urgency, but by custom, ceremony, and a slow, practiced ease. You return home or to your countryside villa for prandium, a light lunch. Cold meats, pickled vegetables, maybe a fig or two. You begin in the appetitorium, the changing room, where slaves help you undress and store your garments in niches. You move then to the tepidarum, warm and fragrant with oils. The humidity settles gently on your skin. You linger. You breathe. You lie on couches in the triclinium, surrounded by friends, acquaintances, perhaps poets or philosophers. The meal begins with gustatory appetizers, oysters, olives, honeyed dormice. Wine always watered. Strong drink is for barbarians. A flute player performs softly in the background, not for show, but for the gentle shaping of the air. It is a deliberate heat, one that seeps into the bones and quiets the joints. The bed, made of wood and woven ropes, is layered in soft wool and linen. A slave draws the curtain. Another extinguishes the oil lamp. A slave might scrape your skin with a strigil, a curved blade for oil and sweat. The sensation is not painful, it is relieving. Lulled by the memory of figs and laughter, marble baths and murmured names, purifying. You eat lightly bread dipped in olive oil, perhaps dates or cheese. The first meal, yentaculum, is modest. Heavier pleasures are reserved for later. You emerge refreshed, wrapped in towels, your skin warm and tingling. Outside, the city murmurs. Inside, the day begins with a gentle yawn. Your fortune is established. You are a Roman of means, not one of the emperors or consuls, no, but your family name is known. Your home, a domus, stands within the city walls, tucked behind high outer walls that guard your privacy. A slave brings you warm water for washing. The linen towel is freshly beaten and sun-dried. You might play dice or listen to songs in Greek. You don't overindulge. Tomorrow has its own ritual, exchanging pleasantries with other citizens of status. Perhaps you stop by the baths, but not to bathe just yet. Fruits follow, and nuts and pastries flavored with dates or sesame. Between courses, poetry may be recited. A lyre might be played, or conversation wanders to politics, to lineage, to dreams. You listen to an orator in the basilica, or catch the whisper of a Senate debate. You make yourself visible. First, you discuss business. Incense burns in the corners. Lamps flicker with golden light. There is no rush. The meal is an orchestration timed, layered, cultured. You make yourself remembered. Your morning is spent in the tablinum, a reception room open to the atrium where clients visit. They line up early, modestly dressed, to offer you their morning salutations. They speak carefully. You nod. A few coins are handed out in small purses, as is tradition. This ritual patroness and cliens binds the layers of Roman society like the mortar in your courtyard tiles. Later you walk or are carried to the forum, the heart of public life. You do not hurry. You pause beneath colonnades. By midday the city has warmed and the world slows. And then the baths. The Roman bathhouse is not simply for cleanliness. It is a temple to routine, to renewal, to the pleasure of order. Next, the caldarium, the hot room. Steam rises from the water basin. You sweat, but not uncomfortably. The shock is bracing, yes, but welcome. The pungent fermented fish sauce, beloved by Romans. You cool down in the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The afternoon drifts toward evening. You recline, not sit, but recline for the cena, the evening feast. It can last hours. The main course may be roasted lamb, or baked fish, or dishes flavored with garum. Slaves attend silently. As the evening deepens, some guests leave. Others linger for conversatio, the after-dinner drinking. And when you finally return to your chamber, the walls are cool. Outside, Rome slumbers beneath a canopy of stars. Inside, silence settles like ash in the atrium pool. You drift to sleep beneath painted gods. Long after the marble baths have cooled, after the laughter from the triclinium has faded into the courtyards, Rome does not sleep all at once. Some corners of the eternal city remain gently restless. A flicker of lamplight still glows behind a silk-draped window. Somewhere the faint rhythm of sandals tapping cobblestones can be heard, perhaps a servant returning from an errand. Their water whispering through channels that run above rooftops and beneath stones, silent arteries that feed the thirst of 10,000 homes. If you listen, truly listen, you might even hear the slight creak of ropes from a distant portico, where drying linens sway like ghosts in the soft night breeze, or a courier bringing sealed news to a senator's door. The aqueducts murmur overhead. A temple bell chimes in the distance, not a loud clang, but a gentle tolling. Maybe it's for Vesta, maybe for sleep itself. A baby might cry, soothed quickly by a nursing slave's lullaby. The sounds are never sharp. They are muffled by time, softened by stone, absorbed by walls older than memory. Even in stillness, Rome breathes. Dogs bark now and then, but far off. You might imagine a single candle still burning beside a scroll half-read, unfinished. Its wax pools slowly, lazily. No one rushes to blow it out. Cypress trees rustle faintly. The night presses down, not with fear, but with weightless calm. And all around it the city dreams. Marble statues stand watch over sleeping gardens. Your breath slows. Your body softens. Tomorrow, Rome will rise again, its markets loud, its politics tangled, but rarely acknowledged, its courtyards bright with gossip and figs. But for now it is a city of hushes and shadows. Rome's slavery was vast, and like all things Roman, it was organized, categorized, normalized. You might rise in the chill of Pradon to stoke the hearth, prepare oil for the lamps. They were the ones most often seen and heard before sunrise, or lay out breakfast, a small dish of olives, perhaps, or watered wine for your master. Your feet would move soundlessly across mosaic floors. They rose with the sun and moved in groups under the watch of overseers, tilling, planting, harvesting. Deep underground, in the dark veins of the earth, they scraped silver and lead from rock. There is little poetry there, few records, just echoes, just silence. Theirs was a life of rhythm, but not rest. They remained tied in complex ways to their former owners, but they were no longer property. They could earn, marry, speak in court, even own slaves themselves. Enslaved people cleaned temples, repaired aqueducts, entertained crowds in the arena. They were in the background of every triumphal procession, behind every success, underneath every story, carved in stone. A life shaped by seasons, but not by choice. There was always a hand lighting the flame, and your hands would bear the marks of constant work. A name, a lifespan, perhaps a small carving of a loom, a stylus, a water jug. They are not grand, but they are enduring. You might sleep on straw, or not at all, depending on your tasks. A wealthy Roman might have dozens or even hundreds of these house slaves, each assigned a very particular role. There were Greek slaves who taught Latin children geometry, rhetoric, and Homer. There were even slaves who managed businesses, bank accounts, and vast estates on behalf of their masters' men, who were enslaved in name, but wielded extraordinary responsibility. One to brush the master's cloak, one to grind the herbs for sleep, one to read aloud when he bathed. A city of sleepers, the ones whose names were not carved into arches or recited in the Senate, the ones whose hands built the roads, cleaned the mosaics, nursed the children, and turned the wheels of Roman life without ever truly belonging to it. And you one of them. Beneath the sandals, the forgotten slaves of Rome. Now, imagine yourself walking through the streets of Rome once again, but this time not with the eyes of a merchant or a soldier or a senator. Look lower. Some were freed in a master's will, as a gesture of mercy or affection. Others saved tips and coins, bartered favors, waited patiently for the day their price could be paid. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. Below the marble statues and fragrant gardens, beneath the bronze armor and silk togas, there were other lives moving in silence. The enslaved. They were not all the same, nor were they treated as such. Some were domestic, working within the home as cooks, scribes, tutors, nurses, or chambermaids. If you lived as such a slave, your day began early. Others, though, were bound to fields. Imagine the latifundy of vast country estates that stretched for miles. Here, the slaves were not named, but numbered. There were those condemned to the mines, perhaps the worst fate of all, and yet not all was uniform. There were slaves who became philosophers' assistants, who transcribed entire libraries, whose minds were sharper than the stylus they held, and if they were lucky or clever, they could sometimes buy their freedom. Manumission, it was called, a legal act, a ritual of sorts. A freedman or libertus did not simply vanish into Roman society. Still, many did not reach that threshold. Many died as they lived quietly in service. What's perhaps most striking is how normal it all was. Rome was not plagued by moral contradiction over slavery. It was built upon it. And yet just as they lived beneath notice, some of them also lived beneath the ground. In a few tombs scattered on the outskirts of the city, archaeologists have found humble inscriptions, brief, simple dedications, and through them we are reminded of something essential, that behind every column, every forum, every flickering oil lamp, the architects of stillness, Roman temples, and sacred silence. Now let your mind drift toward stillness. Leave behind the bustle of the Roman streets, the carts creaking over stone, the chatter of merchants, the low hum of daily exchange, toward columns that reach up like outstretched arms, toward still courtyards, paved with marble where sandals fall quiet and voices lower to a hush. Something meant to connect stone and spirit, mortal and divine, instead turned toward the sky, and more theatrical in their approach. You're approaching a Roman temple. Steps rise before you, not symmetrically from all sides as in the Greek style, but only at the front, guiding your movement in a single, deliberate path. Was to step out of the flow of ordinary life and into something timeless, to walk into such a space in the time of the empire. But temples in Rome were not quite like those in Greece. Though inspired by the Doric and Ionic orders, they were unmistakably Roman, more enclosed, more axial. A magistrate might leave a tribute before making a political decision. A traveler might drop a coin for safe passage, but there is no spectacle inside. But inside the temple, time slows. Carvings at the base of a column, depicting a myth. A pigeon's feather caught between tiles. A groove in the threshold, worn by generations of feet. Others clung to hillsides, half forgotten, overgrown with ivy and lichen. Some were maintained with great care, tended daily by priests and priestesses. Others had fallen into disuse, their gods fading quietly into memory, their altars dry, their silence unbroken. They were part of daily life gods of the hearth, the doorway, the grain bin, gods of contracts and crossroads, gods who smiled or frowned at weddings, elections, even plumbing repairs, each one pausing, if only for a moment, to acknowledge something larger than themselves. There is no rush, no trade, no laughter, only the measured breath of stillness, the hush of divinity imagined into form, just the weight of presence. Or Minerva with owl and spear, wisdom and war entwined, often several feet high, lifting the temple above the ordinary earth, worn by rain, cracked by earthquakes, framed by modern buildings. And yet they continue to do what they always did. Or Vesta, whose eternal flame once burned without pause. Picture it now. You step onto a broad platform or podium. Columns flank the portico, tall and fluted, carved from travertine or imported marble. Their shadows fall across your shoulders as you climb. The air here is cooler, touched by shade, and the faint scent of incense burned long ago. The scent lingers, faint and resinous frankincense, myrrh, something sacred. Inside the cella, the inner sanctum, there is quiet. Here stands the image of the god or the goddess. Perhaps it is Jupiter, stern and regal, holding thunder in his palm. And though your footsteps echo on the stone, it is not a place for congregational worship. Romans did not gather for sermons or sing hymns as later faiths would do. Temples were not places to be filled with crowds. Children race past in tunics. Vendors call out beneath shaded awnings. The Tiber glints in the distance. But to be witnessed, approached with reverence, observed with humility, and honored with offerings. A priest might murmur a prayer. Outside, life continues. And if you look around closely, you might notice tiny details. Temples were everywhere in Rome. Some stood proudly in the city center, like the great Pantheon, its dome still considered a marvel, its oculus open to the heavens, but always they reminded people of order. The gods, after all, were not distant deities of abstract realms. Temples, then, were not just about worship. They were about anchoring, about giving form to the invisible, about reminding a busy, sprawling, chaotic city to pause. Even now, millennia later, the ruins of those temples stand. They hush the noise. They draw the eye upward. And they invite us to consider what stillness feels like when shaped in stone. The sound of Roman streets, clatter, cries, and occasional silence. Now, open your ears. Not your eyes, just for a moment only your ear. You're standing in the midst of ancient Rome, and the world around you is alive with sound. Not music, not bird song, not the hum of nature, but human noise, thousands of them. Leather soles slapping against stone, the shuffle of old feet, the patter of children's, colleague the hobnailed sandals of legionnaires clinking on cobbles like distant thunder, the hurried beat of someone late for an audience, city noise, wooden wheels groaning beneath the weight of clay amphorae or sacks of flour, mules braying. 8 pig squeals once, short, high, offended. A dog barks in reply. Somewhere a donkey complains with a long chicken squabbling in baskets. Nasal cry that echoes between buildings like a theatrical protest. It was a machine operating without pause. A creak of axles, the rasp of rope under tension. Bakers stoked their fires and kneaded their dough in the dark so that warm bread would greet the day. Grave diggers, torch lit and quiet, made their rounds to carry away the dead before sunrise. And then there were the night watchmen armed with staves, patrolling for thieves or for flames. A quiet courtyard off a side street, where only the rustle of a fig tree could be heard. A public fountain where, in the lull between visitors, the only sound was the gentle trickle of water over stone. Iron-rimmed wheels hitting uneven stones with an almost musical clop, whispering to them like old friends. A scribe sharpening his stylus while a breeze flicked at the edge of his parchment. A woman whispering to her lover in the shadows, worshipping, cooking, marching, and dreaming all at once. The soft splash of water dumped from a chamber pot above, if you were unlucky. Hawkers singing the praises of their wares. Dates from Numidia. For a brief moment, all heads turn, and the street just briefly listens. Honeyed wine from Campania, perfumes, wigs, fresh ink. Sponges for sale, one calls. No splinters, I swear. The kind that is layered, chaotic, yet strangely rhythmic, an accidental symphony of civilization. It was the sound of a people building, trading, arguing, start with the footsteps. Brass instruments blare out an uneven rhythm. Overlay that with carts. Now the animals. A man reciting Virgil loudly to impress no one in particular. A baker shouting for his boy to check the oven before the loaves turn to charcoal. And above it all, the voices. Criers shouting the news. Grain ships arrive from Egypt. their tones practiced and rising above the din. You might hear a child's wail, a woman scolding in clipped Latin. At intervals, an official parade or religious procession winds through, parting the noise like a temporary tide. Pipes play shrill melodies, but that quiet doesn't last. Rome, as a city, never quite falls silent, not even at night. You might imagine that in the small hours before dawn, the streets would sleep. But this was not a sleepy town. Night shift laborers pushed carts to and from the docks. Even in the hush of midnight, you would hear things. A drunk slurring a forgotten song. Dogs fighting over scraps. And yet, within all this motion, there were pockets of peace. A shaded alley where vines grew along the walls. In these rare places, Rome breathed, not with the roar of empire, but with the sigh of small human moments. A mother rocking a baby to sleep, humming a lullaby older than the Forum itself. An old man feeding pigeons as the sun rose. All cities have noise, but ancient Rome had a particular kind, layered, relentless, and full of life. Even now, when you close your eyes and allow yourself to imagine, you can almost hear it. Not just the grandeur of the empire, but the background hum of humanity. The Roman household gods, Lares, Penates, and quiet prayers, step quietly now into the threshold of a Roman home. Not a grand marble villa, though those exist, but something simpler, modest, worn with time. The walls are plastered, perhaps with fading frescoes of vines or protective symbols, and something more intangible, the soft presence of devotion. The air is cool, scented faintly with olive oil and dust. These are gentler, closer, quieter. Not Jupiter with his lightning or Mars with his shield. You've entered a space shared not just by a family, but by gods. Not the thunderous gods of myth and empire. Spirits of ancestors, perhaps, or localized protectors of that particular dwelling. One might imagine them perched unseen by the doorway, and to ensure the home was never without something warm to offer. Their presence was invoked to bless meals, to keep flour from spoiling. They watched over the thresholds, the walls, the courtyard, the quiet corners, observing with patient interest as life passed through. In essence, these figures honored the life force within the household itself, not divine in the distant imperial sense, laughter in the courtyard, warmth by the fire, but sacred in the way the everyday can be sacred sunlight in the kitchen, a libation of wine, a little smoke from a lamp, a whispered word, guard us, offerings increased. Bread would be left on the altar, too, especially during the Compitalia festival, when little dolls representing household members were hung up, symbolically handed over for protection. To keep the balance between human and spirit, between flesh and the idea of home. In the pinch of flour left beside a little clay figure, we glimpse another Rome, a Rome that did not conquer, or legislate, or sculpt in stone, but one that simply tried to care for its own. In this way, the personal spilled into the communal. The private rituals of the hearth echoed out into the broader world of the vicus, the neighborhood. Wine sprinkled on the threshold, not to beg exactly, but to stay in harmony with the unseen. Children were taught to nod or bow before the shrine, just slightly before meals. And at festivals or family milestones, birthdays, marriages, returns from travel, the shrine would be tidied, adorned with garlands and honored with extra offerings. They are the Lares and Penates, the household spirits of Rome. Each home, no matter how poor, kept a place for them, but to be lived with. They were silent companions to the daily rituals, sweeping the floor, lighting the lamp, mending clothing, preparing a meal. Their presence offered a sense of continuity between past and present, between life and death, between the world within and the one outside. Usually a small niche in the wall, called a lararium. If you look closely, you'll see the outlines of figures painted, or carved dancing youths holding drinking horns, or perhaps little statues arranged on a ledge. In wealthier homes, the figures might be made of bronze. In humbler households, they might be shaped from clay or wood, hand-molded by someone who believed enough to try. The Lares were guardians of the home and hearth. The Penates were the spirits of the pantry, the keepers of food, storage, and sustenance. Worship wasn't grand or formal. It was woven into routine. At dawn, the father might offer a pinch of salt or grain. Some homes kept other figures, too small, clay genii, representing the spirit of the family head. In times of illness or misfortune, prayers became more fervent. Interestingly, the Lares weren't confined only to individual homes. Each Roman neighborhood had its own Lares Compitals, public guardian spirits of the crossroads. Small shrines marked where streets met. Offerings were placed here. What makes these household gods so comforting is not their power, but their intimacy. They weren't gods to be feared. And even now, as you imagine the flicker of an oil lamp casting shadows on a painted niche, there's a sense of stillness, a quiet held not by silence, but by reverence. So much of Rome was grand, boisterous, and public. But here, in the gentle prayers whispered before dinner, to protect, to nourish, to endure, like the Lares themselves, quietly present, always watching, a soldier's sandal, the hidden logistics of a Roman army. When you think of the Roman army, you might imagine the thunder of marching feet, the flash of iron, the barking orders in Latin echoing across the hills, slower, more mundane, and spoons and sacks of grain, the unglamorous details of movement, of feeding thousands of men, of keeping them clothed and shod and marginally clean, mile after dusty mile. But just beneath that image, beneath the crested helmets and glinting shields, there was something far quieter. Salted pork or dried beans, sometimes olives. If you were lucky, grain was issued in bulk, often wheat, which the men ground themselves with small hand mills they carried in their kits. A soldier's day could begin not with battle, but with the dull, scraping rhythm of grinding flour while the mist still clung to the fields. The Roman army was as much engineer as warrior. Every night they built a camp, digging ditches, raising ramparts, placing palisades. Each camp was laid out to regulation streets, commander's tent, supply zones. Every morning they broke it down again. Every evening rebuilt. War was repetition, order, routine, sandals, shovels, vinegar in wooden cups, a click of hobnails on stone, the soft crunch of wheat ground into dust, the long line of bodies carrying their burdens mile after mile, day after day. The Roman army, for all its might and myth, was held together by sandals. Latrine pits were dug away from the water source. Soldiers were expected to maintain personal cleanliness, sometimes even shaving daily, though razors were crude and cold water unforgiving. Lice were common, so were fleas. Trudging behind is a soldier bent under a sack of barley, tightening the strap of his sandal, humming to himself, and hoping the next stop has warm water and bread that hasn't gone hard. cloaks were boiled when possible, and every now and then a full bathhouse was erected, with warm water and oil, if the engineers had time and the site was safe. This is the side of war that makes no noise, but without it, nothing marched. A sick mule could delay an entire column. A dead ox might mean a broken line of supply. And so, alongside the soldiers were stable hands, veterinarians, and muleteers, speaking to their animals in soft, rhythmic murmurs before dawn. And it was no flimsy slip-on. Wax tablets with messy Latin scribbles or parchment letters sealed with string. Messages from wives, brothers, the occasional coin or dried fig sent across the empire's veins of road. These quiet moments, huddled by firelight reading news from home, were far from the glories of war, but perhaps more real. Leather cracked. Every few weeks, sandals needed repairs, some by military cobblers, others patched by the soldiers themselves during moments of rest. A worn-out sole in Germania as mud could be the difference between a steady march and a fall into freezing water. Constructed of thick leather, its sole was studded with hobnails, small iron pegs that clinked softly with each step on stone roads. They gave traction and durability, turning each soldier into a sort of softly jingling metronome, keeping time with the empire's ambitions. Let's begin with the footwear. The caliga was the standard-issue military sandal, but hobnails wore out. Then there was food, both to quench thirst and purify water. It tasted sharp, bitter, but after weeks of dusty roads and reused canteens, it was safer than most alternatives. Each legionnaire carried his own rations, bread or hardtack, but most of the burden fell on the soldier. A Roman legionary's pack might weigh over 40 kilograms: shield, helmet, tools, cookware, spare clothes, and a folded sagum that doubled as bedding. Poles for tents, carried on the shoulder, were tied with rope. You didn't just march, you carried a world with you. And always there was the vinegar posca, a diluted sour wine issued to troops. Each unit had its own pack animals and wagons. It was this weight, more than the sword, that tested a man. There were also the tools of building. Sanitation mattered too. Then there were the animals, oxen and mules that pulled carts, carried siege weapons, hauled grain. These animals required feed, water, care. Mail arrived irregularly but was cherished. And so what kept the Roman army moving wasn't just discipline or courage, it was flour. There's something deeply human about it. In the grand paintings of history, you might see generals and battles and triumphal arches, but somewhere this was Rome, too. Whispers in the wall, the graffiti of Pompeii, the city sleeps now, beneath a hush of ash and time. Pompeii, entombed in volcanic silence, has become a museum of stillness. Streets hold their breath. Walls do not crumble, they remember. And when the ash cleared centuries later, what they remembered was not just grandeur or marble. Pompeii was a lively city, noisy, colorful, ordinary. Smooth stucco plastered over brick, painted in rich reds and ochres. And into that paint, into that soft surface, people scratched their thoughts, poems, jokes, insults, declarations of love. It was graffiti, but it was also a kind of soul. Bakers stoked their ovens before sunrise. Shopkeepers arranged their goods, and lovers bored children, gossiping neighbors, ... They all had something to write, but something far more intimate. They remembered what people said, not to historians, but to each other. In Pompeii, the walls whisper. Honest, it's not noble, but it's real. These were not polished words meant for posterity. They were spontaneous, sometimes crude, often funny, sometimes heart-breakingly human. Two friends immortalized, not in stone, but in boredom, except carved permanently into the side of your neighbor's house. Before Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, there's even a caricature of a man with a donkey's head, mid-dance. It's unclear who the joke was aimed at. Maybe no one, maybe everyone. They didn't have social media, but they had walls. You felt it too, haven't you? And the urge to leave a name carved into a desk, a heart in a tree trunk, a username on a digital post. If you want to know our names, they are Gaius and Aulus. One of the most famous etchings reads, "We two dear men, friends forever, were here." Simple. Further down the street, on the wall of a tavern, the stone under your sandals still holds the night's coolness. You pass an archway, pause beneath a vine-draped wall, and there another whisper that the city would vanish. That one day strangers would come, walking silently through ruined homes and preserved bedrooms, listening to the walls, not for glory but for honesty. I screwed the barmaid. A gentle warmth spreads from your chest to your fingertips as your breathing slows. You can feel the stone walls around you, not cold, not harsh, but worn smooth by time and touch. They've forgotten their fear of fire, only memory. They no longer hold the weight of the world. And underneath that, in a different hand, the voices have faded, and you are here, floating in the stillness between centuries. So did I, she's no good at it. The dust has settled. History is also the story of someone waiting for a friend, complaining about lunch, declaring affection, laughing in the dark. It's not poetic. Oil lamps flicker behind windows that haven't seen fire in centuries. You can almost hear the low creak of a wooden door being latched, the final sigh of a clay roof tile cooling under the stars, for bearing the weight of so many stupid scribbles. Some graffiti recorded daily frustrations. The gatekeeper is a lazybones, and political endorsements scribbled onto alley corners, or the bathhouse is full of fleas. Others were bits of poetry, now unfinished in time. O wall, I am amazed you have not fallen down. It's almost humorous, imagining someone standing there, stylus in hand, muttering to the wall as they carved. He is worthy of public office. We find shopping lists, messages to lovers, records of debts. Some were doodles, sketches of gladiators with oversized swords, or crude portraits of local celebrities. I beg you to elect Lucius Popedius Sabinus as aedile. Even by strangers is deeply familiar. It's the ancient version of campaign flyers, scrawled beneath a fresco of the god Bacchus. Someone simply wrote, and not all graffiti were words. In a small room of a home, it is people writing themselves raw, unedited, and unsupervised. I was here, that's all. No name, no date, just presence. That impulse of needing to be seen before the marketplace stirs. Now imagine yourself wandering those quiet streets in the early morning, another etching, barely legible, carved perhaps by candlelight or moonlight. Take your time, traveler. Nothing lasts. It almost feels like they knew. Pompeii's graffiti isn't history written about people. And in those scratches, those casual, careless moments, there's something enduring. A reminder that beneath emperors and armies and marble monuments, so tonight, let the walls of Pompeii speak gently to you. across the centuries. They remember. Echoes by lamplight. The wind has changed. The city is quieter now. Somewhere beyond these ancient ruins, the last shutters have been closed for the night. You remain in the in-between, not fully asleep, not fully awake. There's no urgency here. A moth dances near a lantern. Somewhere in the dark, the quiet hush of distant water, maybe a fountain, maybe just memory. The past is close, but it asks nothing of you. Breathe in and out. Let the dust remain undisturbed. Let the streets sleep. We'll return soon. Ghosts of the Via Appia, death and memory in the Roman world. Let us drift now beyond the walls of the city, following the gentle curve of a road as old as the Republic. The Via Appia, the queen of roads, was once the grand artery of the Roman world, a stretch of stone and dust that linked Rome to the southern lands of Campania and beyond. Instead, they lined their roads with tombs, monuments of marble and brick, large and small, solemn and showy. And so, to leave the city was to walk beside memory. No hush like the hush between names carved in stone. Today it lies quieter, adorned with mosaics of dolphins, flowers, or scenes from myths. These were not only places of rest, but also of status. They sat beside the tombs as if at a picnic, not to mourn, but to remember, to eat and drink in their company. Inscriptions survive, many startlingly tender. To Marcus, who shared my tent for 3 winters, may the gods watch you now. For Romans did not believe that death erased your presence. The poorest were buried in mass pits, the unnamed and unremembered. And yet, even for them, there were prayers. A whispered word from a passing priest, a crumb of bread left on the altar. You could still be part of the household, still be honored, still be spoken to. A grave left uncared for might breed discontent. A soul forgotten could grow bitter. Thus the living remembered out of love, but also duty. Memory was a moral act, a safeguard against wandering spirits. You feel the past around you, not heavy, but gentle. Not sorrowful, but serene, the kind of quiet that asks you to slow down, to breathe. A reminder to passers-by that this man, this family had lived well and deserved to be remembered. A ribbon of worn paving stones, some broken, some sunk into the earth, framed by cypress trees that whisper when the breeze stirs through their dark needles. But in the days of the empire, this road was far from silent. It carried legions and traders, magistrates and slaves, ox-drawn carts and senators in their litters. And always it carried the dead. Romans did not bury their loved ones within the city. That was forbidden by law and by long-held tradition. Others were buried whole, in niches carved within the walls of the tombs, wrapped in linen, surrounded by offerings. A small cup of wine, a few coins. The air is dry and still, and the scent of wild thyme drifts on the breeze, a favorite comb. Imagine yourself now strolling down the Via Appia at twilight. On either side of the road, tombs of every shape rise from the ground, some no taller than your knee, others grand as houses. Inscriptions are carved into stone names, virtues, accomplishments. He was loyal. She lived honestly. A simple terracotta plaque, a worn inscription half lost to lichen and rain. Some names now gone completely, the stone outlasting the memory. He gave bread to the poor. There's no silence like the silence of old tombs. Many were cremated, their ashes placed in urns. The rich had elaborate mausoleums domed and pillared. But there were humbler markers, too. On festival days like the Parentalia in February, families came with garlands and wine. They sang songs for the dead. Death was not an end, but a folding into another space, a quieter existence. Even soldiers far from home buried their comrades in neat rows, with care. Of course, not everyone had a grave. The Romans believed that the dead could be restless if neglected. And still the road stretches on. As you walk, your footsteps are soft against ancient stone. The sun is low now. The cypresses grow darker. And somewhere in the distance a night bird sings, not a song of mourning, but one of presence. Here on the Via Appia, time lingers. The living and the dead walk together. And you are in good company. Cloaks, coins, and codes, the life of a Roman spy. Let us now slip behind the mosaic curtain of official Rome and enter a world not often recorded in marble or scroll. It is not the world of emperors or armies, but of watchers in the shadow, the quiet hum of intelligence in a city that never truly slept. Rome, vast and sprawling, was an empire built on many things, roads, legions, taxes, and law, but also on whispers. Tonight, you are a speculator, a Roman military scout, an intelligence gatherer, tasked with knowing things others should not know. The wine is sour, the bread a little stale, but the company is rich with potential. Conversations drift from neighboring tables, merchants haggling, a freed woman boasting of her lover's secrets, a Greek doctor muttering about a senator's mysterious illness. You listen. Always you blend in. The frumenterie, originally just grain collectors, begin to serve as messengers and spies. They watch governors. They report on generals. They count how many times a senator visits a temple, or whose daughter is speaking too freely at the market. They know which slaves talk in their sleep. The term would come to include informants, message runners, even imperial spies. But your work begins with patience, observation, and silence. Spies who overstep may vanish, or worse, become victims of those they watched too closely. You carry multiple signet rings to match your story. You share wine, but not truth. Perhaps to the theater, perhaps to the Temple of Mercury, perhaps to the home of a widow whose brother was once a general and now drinks too much wine. You know of one man, your predecessor, whose boots were returned without a name. They say his tongue was nailed to the wall of a bathhouse in Alexandria, but no one ever confirms it. That's the way of it. And so, you are no longer a citizen or soldier, and the scrolls you carry to the imperial palace before dawn. You begin your evening in a tavern near the Forum, seated at a wooden table with worn legs. You know that knowing is power. Your clothing is unremarkable, a simple cloak. Hours spent pacing the bathhouses, quiet days following a grain shipment to see if it disappears before the port. Weeks posted near the border to record troop movements, sometimes on scraps of parchment rolled and slipped inside hollowed coins. Other times a clay pot arrives from the provinces, but the name scratched on the bottom, barely visible, tells you what needs to be known. On rare occasions, a colleague leaves you a piece of bread with a single date carved on its crust. You eat it, listening to the hush of unseen footsteps through Rome's colonnaded corridors. You understand this truth. Not all empires fall by sword. Some unravel at the edges when no one is watching. No one ever sees the message. There's little glory, and often less thanks. But your knowledge keeps the legions moving safely, supplies running true, and rivals in check. Worn sandals, the kind of face that disappears into crowds. But under your tunic is a wax tablet for notes, and tucked in your belt an iron stylus shaped like a pen, but weighted for striking. Much of your work is uneventful. Rome was obsessed with control, and information was the quiet scaffolding beneath the marble. You receive messages in code. In the service of emperors like Augustus and Hadrian, the role of internal surveillance expands. Of course, the dangers are constant. You are always cautious. Even when gathering information from the outer provinces' Germanic tribes or Nabatean traders, the game remains the same. You travel with a false name, and when you return to Rome, you melt back into the streets. You say little, you remember everything. You sleep with a dagger beneath your straw mattress, though you rarely need it. You are not a killer. You are a collector of threads. You know how the grain moves, how the gossip flows, how the tides rise near Brundisium. You know who owes debts to whom, and you never leave traces. Your world is not celebrated with triumphs or carved onto plinths. It is remembered only by the dust that clings to your cloak as you lie back now and some are held together by those who always are, the builders beneath. Life as a Roman construction worker, it begins with dust. Fine, pale, and ever settling, it clings to your eyelashes before the sun even rises. You blink and stretch your aching limbs. The wooden planks you slept on are still warm from your body, but already the foreman's voice barks faintly from the street. Time to begin again. You are a Fabri, a Roman builder, part of the invisible workforce that raises temples, walls, aqueducts, and homes, the bones of the empire. You do not write your name in stone, but your labor becomes it. No one talks much. The clang of bronze tools, the creak of a crane's timber arms. When scaffolding collapses, you rebuild it without complaint. You've lost 2 toes to a careless cart and 1 friend to a falling beam, but the city keeps growing. The work never pauses. He whistles, poorly. The scaffold groans in the wind. No one applauds, but the world around them stands because of you. You pass temples you helped raise, statues you helped mount, fountains you once shaped from rough stone. You know the arches must be placed just so. Sometimes it doesn't. Once you saw a design for a column that twisted like a vine. You built it anyway, stone by stone, using nothing more than a plumb line, a guess, and the tilt of your head. You know which stone will sing when struck and which will crack. You know that in the forum, senators will walk across the paving stones you laid without knowing your name. You sweat, of course, but it dries before it can cool you. The trowel in your hand becomes an extension of your arm, smoothing plaster across the inner vault of a caldarium ceiling. Overhead, painted stars have yet to be added. For now, it is just shadow and echo. Or perhaps just imagining it, and let the ache in your shoulders fade into the hush of evening. The hammer sleeps. The chisel rests. You say nothing, but watch that he adds the pozzolana, the volcanic sand, properly. Without it, the cement will crumble. And Rome does not crumble. The splash of lime in a bucket. These are the sounds of your world. You know how to swing a hammer, how to cut limestone by feel, how to mix mortar that will outlive even emperors. You and your fellow workers know it better as an endless, back-breaking sight. You haul water by leather sack, raise scaffolding with rope burnt stiff from the sun, and stamp clay bricks with the legion's number before firing them in a low, smoky kill. Your day begins in the cementitium yard where piles of volcanic ash and lime dust billow in the morning air. The tools are simple but heavy. Chisels, wedges, wooden pulleys, clay molds for bricks. And your hands, always your hands. Blisters are constants, as are sunburn and silence. Today you're reworking on a public bathhouse, one of the emperor's gifts to the people, or so the marble inscription will say. A young apprentice beside you mixes the concrete. As the sun climbs higher, the heat becomes a quiet pressure. You are part of a crew that works in shifts, though no time ever feels like rest. When a wall rises, you move to another. And beneath it all, beneath the noise and lifting and sweat, is pride. Quiet, unspoken pride. At times the foreman brings a sketch, ink on thin wax, from an engineer or architect. Sometimes it makes sense. And when the day ends, you return home with calloused hands and dust in your nostrils. The city is quieter now. No one nods as you walk past, and that is enough. You drift now, lying on cool stone. The city will still be there tomorrow. Because of you. Letters from the edge, a Roman soldier's life on the frontier. The ink freezes as it touches the parchment. You blow gently on the surface, watching the black script glisten before it dulls. Your handwriting is stiff, blocky. You were never meant to be a scribe. And yet here you are, in a wooden outpost at the very edge of the known world. The wind does not howl so much as moan, a constant, low complaint across the moors. Those heavy-strapped marching boots still stiff from yesterday's frost. You eat a cold barley cake, sometimes dried figs, sometimes pickled fish if the last supply ship didn't founder. Always bland. You can feel the tension in your teeth, the way horses sense a coming storm. The druids are said to live out here still. You carve lines into the post beside your cot, one for each moon past, hidden in sacred groves where even birds fall silent. You've never seen one. You're not sure you want to. You guard what feels like the end of the earth. A Syrian who speaks of the desert with tears in his eyes and never touches the stew here without wincing. Sometimes you miss the sounds of the city, the voices, the wine, the clatter of carts. Here there is only the occasional owl cry and the rustle of wind through timber slats. You're all bound not by love of Rome, but by the cold and by duty. Cleaner. No smoke to dull their shimmer. And when the frost is just right, the grass outside sparkles like a temple floor. You sometimes wonder if this is what the gods see, the edge of empire, glowing quietly in the dark. Always just enough. Fold the parchment. You'll give it to the next courier if one comes. If not, it doesn't matter. The words are out of your head now. This is Britannia, the northernmost outpost of Rome's endless reach. Too quiet, the Optio says, but you've heard that before. You tighten your belt. The cold seeps in slowly, respectfully, like a fellow soldier taking watch. Check the curve of your gladius and file into formation with 30 others. You stand. You wait. Behind you, 1,000 miles of roads and cities. Ahead, only fog, forest, and faces you do not understand. Riding home to a sister who may never read your words. It's cold. Colder than you imagined a world could be. The local tribes have been quiet this week. Your day begins with ritual, not thought. You wake before the horn sounds. You buckle your caligay. Outside the vallum, a muddy ditch and rampart, rings your small wooden fort like a question mark. The day is spent watching, patrolling. Decimus, go sharpen your spear. repairing the same stretch of palisade you've rebuilt 3 times already. You speak in murmurs, the same Latin phrases repeated with the lazy cadence of people who no longer need to mean what they say. Yes, sir, Aquila, take the South Post. Already did. Sometimes you're sent beyond the walls, into the wilds. The trees whisper in a tongue older than Rome. Back inside the camp, you write letters, you sharpen blades. You clean armor already spotless. Your comrades are a patchwork. One from Carthage who whistles when nervous. Another from Gaul who plays dice too loudly. Occasionally a writer brings news from the south. A new emperor, another revolt in Germania, taxes increased. None of it matters here. At night, the oil lamp flickers as you stare at your cot ceiling. Still, the stars are brighter here. You put down your quill. You lie back on your cot. The rough wool blanket scratches your chin, and the frontier fades into sleep. Ashes and stillness, the long sleep of Pompeii. The city does not stir. Streets once alive with cartwheels and sandals, with the hoarse calls of market sellers and the hum of daily life, now lie frozen under a blanket of ancient silence. Pompeii, once sunlit and bustling, sleeps beneath layers of time, quiet, buried, suspended in an eternal afternoon. If you were to walk its streets now, your footfalls would make no echo. The dust settles, and now we leave the empire behind, where priests whispered in shadowed chambers, where emperors feasted and slaves swept mosaic floors. You've glimpsed lives both humble and grand, from the stinging sweat of the battlefield to the warm steam of a private bath. Each voice now softened by time, each heartbeat long since folded into silence. The torches have been extinguished, the marble halls have emptied. In a ruined garden, moonlight slips through broken columns, brushing over once-tended laurel trees. In your mind you drift among them, not hurried, not searching, just moving slowly through the echo of an age. Out beyond the villas and vineyards, even the roads have gone quiet, the famed Roman miles covered now in moss and stillness. The empire that once refused to sleep has finally laid down. There a small thermopolium, its counter still stained by the heat of long-gone stew pots. Only the hush of time and the low, dry whisper of the wind. Amphorae rest in corners as if waiting to be refilled. The sun rose as it always did, warm across the tiled rooftops. Housewives swept doorways, bakers slid loaves into communal ovens. In the forum, men argued about taxes or local elections. Children kicked stones down alleyways. The mountain Vesuvius loomed as it always had, silent, green, unremarkable. Tonight you've walked where legionnaires marched. There is no need to remember it all. Dogs barked. A man curled in a hallway, clutching a cloth. A woman frozen mid-run, the outline of her jewelry still visible in the ash. A dog twisted in a desperate spiral near a doorway. Birds took flight, and in the afternoon it came, a column of smoke, black and boiling. Grass now grows between paving stones. Wildflowers bloom in the baths. It sleeps not in sorrow but in stillness, wrapped gently in the dust of its own time, untouched by the noise of centuries. Lizards scurry along mosaic floors once polished by sandals and water. The wind no longer carries soot, only birdsong. It hums gently beneath the surface. It whispers through layers of ash and time, rising higher than anything the townspeople had ever seen. Ash began to fall like snow. Light faded, panic bloomed. History holds that burden. You need only let the story settle around you. Roofs collapsed, the air grew thick, choking. And then, in the night, the final breath, a wave of heat, impossible and swift, sweeping through homes and temples, through doorways and baths, halting everything mid-motion. Like fine Roman dust, delicate, undemanding, resting gently upon thought. Let the sounds of sandals and speeches dissolve into quiet breath. Let your thoughts slow like ancient water through an aqueduct, steady and smooth. Somewhere in a crumbling amphitheater, a breeze stirs forgotten applause. Only stillness. You've wandered far, but there's nowhere left to go tonight. Walls whisper of laughter and feasts, of arguments and flirtations, of stolen bread and mended tunics. Everyday life paused like a held breath. Let the marble fade into mist. You can almost imagine the city breathing again, not with noise, but with memory. The kind of breath that belongs to stories rather than lungs. Breathe in the stillness. Exhale the centuries. The empire sleeps, and so can you. Good night, traveler. Sleep gently. We'll return to history. Another night. The paving stones are still there, worn smooth in their centers from years of steps, ruts where wagon wheels passed. Here a crossroads, but there are no voices. It began quietly that final morning in 79A, then the earth shifted. A rumble, low and animal, ran through the streets. Some fled, others waited. By evening, pumice stones rained down like fists. Time stopped, and it remained stopped for nearly 1,700 years. When excavators first uncovered Pompeii in the 18th century, they found more than ruins. They found moments. But there is no pain in the stone now. The frescoes have faded, but their colors linger. Soft reds, dusty blues, the pale gold of painted garlands. It is strangely peaceful. Nature has reclaimed much of the city. In the evening, when the site is closed to tourists, when even the guides have gone, Pompeii is not gone. It is waiting. Waiting for eyes to see its quiet beauty, for minds to hear its unfinished conversations. And as you let your own eyes soften, as your breath grows slow and deep, know this: the past is not loud. Tonight it has kept you company. Sleep now, traveler. The fires have long burned out. The stone is cool. The sky above Pompeii is quiet once more.